to the motherfucking relay. We're covering today's top boxing news.
Okay, we'll start with this. This weekend, in Monte Carlo, on the undercard of Mudajan Akhmadaliev's next fight, unbeaten, newly crowned IBF lightweight champion Beatriz Ferreira of Brazil will be making her first defense of the blue belt against France's own Boudersa. We've talked about this fight a couple of weeks ago, just another look.
Why does it say Super Feather?
Somebody at BoxRec must not realize Beatriz doesn't campaign at Super Feather. She campaigns at lightweight, where she reigns as IBF champion, sporting a professional record of 5 wins with no losses, no draws, 2 knockouts. Having become a world champion in only 5 professional bouts is either a credit to the fighter or an indictment to the division. It all depends. You have to look at it on a case-by-case basis. In the case of Beatriz Ferreira, it's a credit to the fighter, as the lightweight division is not a barren division. There are plenty of girls there to fight, and if somebody thinks they can take the blue belt from Beatriz, step up. Boudersa is sporting a professional record of 23 wins with 2 losses, 2 draws, 4 knockouts. Having never been knocked out in 27 professional bouts, I think that's set to change this weekend. I think Beatriz Ferreira is going to stop Boudersa for the first time in her career. Boudersa, who has already fought 3 times this year. She's a busy fighter. She fought 3 times last year, and she's already fought 3 times this year. Once in February, again in May, then again in October.
Against what is mostly pedestrian-level competition, the only halfway decent fighter that she's fought in recent memory was France's own Rima Ayadi, who beat her by way of a points decision in February of this year.
She has since rebounded off that loss, and she's on a 2-fight winning streak, but she's about to be on the bounce yet again this weekend. So even though Licia has a lot more fights and a lot more time under the hot lights than Beatriz Ferreira does in the paid ranks, the talent level, it's night and day.
Beatriz is leagues above Licia, and that's what you're going to see this weekend.
If you haven't seen Beatriz in action already, she's a ferocious fighter, mid-range to inside combination puncher, and very strong, very fast, very athletic, nimble. Everything you want in a fighter. Skilled, plenty skilled, but also persistent and aggressive enough to put on a show, to entertain a crowd, being of Brazilian descent.
Wow.
Beatriz doesn't have a built-in audience like a Mexican fighter or a Puerto Rican fighter, an American fighter, or a Brit. Brazilians don't take in boxing as much as they do mixed martial arts. That is their preferred combat sport. So if the goal is to try and turn Beatriz into a household name, you're going to have to do it the old-fashioned way. You're going to have to just try and showcase her skills to the best of your ability. Sacrifices need to be made. You don't need to be an expert on women's boxing to know that Beatriz is going to pounce on Licia this weekend. But the subject of making her a star requires a bit more thought, and that's where sacrifices need to be made. I'm talking about putting her in there with a familiar face, a familiar name. The conversation around Beatriz Ferreira has been centered on a Caroline Dubois fight. That's not about to happen.
It's not going to be her.
And I sincerely doubt it's going to be Katie Taylor, who currently reigns as undisputed champion 1 division north of where Beatriz fights. I think Katie's days as a lightweight might be done.
Then who's it going to be?
One other of Matchroom's Valkyries does reign in this division as a champion, WBO champion. I'm talking about 3-weight champion Terry Harper. She's got a belt in this division. So does Beatriz. It would seem the appropriate fight to make in the coming year. And as much as I like Terry Harper and have been a fan of her for years, if they put her in the ring with Beatriz, Beatriz is going to stop her. Beatriz is going to knock her out. But perhaps that's what it's going to take to make people stand up and pay attention. That's what happened when Alicia knocked her out.
It's what could happen if Beatriz knocks her out.
Dangerous fight for Terry Harper, who's been there and done that with some of the best. She's been a champion at 130, champion briefly at 154, and she's a champion now at 135. There's not a whole lot left for Terry to do.
Crawford.
So that might be the play in the coming year. A unification match between Beatriz Ferreira and Terry Harper. And I anticipate that if they make it, Beatrice stops her. Maybe that'll be the launch pad.
Beatrice only has 5 fights anyway. You can hardly expect her to be a household name just 5 fights in, having debuted as a professional roughly 2 years ago.
But now that she's all done with the amateur scene, she competed in the last Olympics, she can focus on the pros, and a knockout win over Terry Harper.
That'll get some attention. For now, she's gonna fight Licia Boudersa this Saturday in Monte Carlo, and I anticipate she's gonna stop her. She's gonna be the first one to knock out France's own Licia Boudersa.
In men's welterweight news, a bombshell story. Bob Arum, Teofimo Lopez versus Boots Ennis is the fight we want.
Really?
It's a major fight that makes so much sense. Now all that's needed is the money and the courage. Top-ranked chairman Bob Arum told Boxing Scene he's aiming to stage a welterweight title fight between his 2-division and current WBO 140-pound champion Teofimo Lopez and unbeaten IBF welterweight champion Jaron Boots Ennis.
That's the fight we want, and I believe we can make it happen.
Arum told Boxing Scene on Monday. Arum previously said he's planning a major bout for Lopez, 21-1 with 13 KOs, for March in MSG, likely the big room, and Lopez, 27, told reporters at Saturday's top-ranked card in Phoenix that he has interest in Ennis along with unbeaten 4-division champion Terrence Crawford. The proposed showdown comes at a time for Philly's Ennis, 33-0 with 29 KOs, when he's cornered to step up and make the bout following his retreat from a proposed junior middleweight fight offered by Saudi Arabia's Turki El Sheikh against unbeaten interim WBC champion Virgil Ortiz. Coming off a defensively porous showing against mandatory opponent Karen Chukadzian, Ennis, 27, declined the lucrative match with the rugged Ortiz, 22-0 with 21 KOs, saying he preferred to stay at 147 pounds. So, when you turn down big money for an Ortiz fight because you want to stay at 147 and unify that division,
Well, this is not a unification match.
you're making time to fight a naturally smaller fighter in a Teofimo Lopez. Could you not have made that time to fight a Virgil Ortiz? Now he'd have a 147-pound fight as requested against a popular champion and a fellow East Coaster that would provide him with the significant stage he's said he's longed for. Arum said a top-rank attorney has been in talks with Ennis' promoter, Eddie Hearn, to make the bout, with the plan being to stage it as a joint pay-per-view on ESPN and DAZN.
We'd ante up for Teofimo, and Eddie will ante up for Ennis.
Arum said. Arum's plan follows concerns from the Lopez camp on Saturday that Top Rank alone couldn't fund the bout. They'll never go for it. Lopez could be left playing a game of musical chairs, the official said. Lopez has been perturbed by the cheaper assignments of Jermaine Ortiz and Steve Claggett this year, and he's lobbied for substantial, well-paying tests that also include Devin Haney and Ryan Garcia when he returns from his suspension ending April 20th. A match with Ennis would satisfy Lopez's desire, providing a meeting with an unbeaten fighter who has been considered one of the sport's top rising talents, while also bringing life back to the glamour division, lacking star power since Crawford won the undisputed title in July of last year. Why would Top Rank want to go for this? Why would they want to do this?
If they wanted to put Teofimo Lopez in a welterweight title fight, they have a welterweight champion of their own, Brian Norman, so why go after one of Eddie's boys?
Being honest, it's a little hard to conjure. It is a little hard to wrap my mind around. What does Top Rank gain from doing this? And I don't think they've ever gotten a return from their investment in Teofimo Lopez. Remember that this is a fighter who never went on to fight on pay-per-view.
He never actually had a big money fight.
The Lomachenko fight was supposed to be that, but it was stifled by the global pandemic and the shutdown. The initial plan was to build that as a pay-per-view, but they ended up billing it as a regular fight instead, given the circumstances. And the Josh Taylor fight, meaningful fight that it might have been, Josh's reputation and his stature in the super lightweight division was already hampered by the controversial decision in the Jack Catterall fight a year prior to fighting Teofimo. In a word, Teofimo has had significant fights, but not big ones. He's had meaningful fights, but not big money fights.
So I don't know that Top Rank ever got a return from this guy, from their investment in his career. Maybe the reason they're willing to do this is because this is their chance to get a return on that investment.
He's been a headache for them. He's been a problematic fighter. He always has a problem. So they figure, why don't we do this fight? He says that he wants it. Let's make it happen. And if he loses, he's not our problem anymore. We get a return on our investment. Eddie will help us promote it so we're not on the hook for the whole thing.
We don't have to promote it by ourselves. We don't have to pay Jaron Ennis.
It's not as risky when the fight is being promoted by two promoters on two separate platforms as a joint pay-per-view. And if Lopez wins, he comes back a hero. If he loses,
he's yesterday's news and he's not our problem anymore. It's about time we got something out of promoting this fighter. Maybe that's the rationale.
what's Teofimo's?
Ennis looked bad in his last fight, so maybe Teofimo feels now is the most opportune time to fight him.
So this will be the first time that Teofimo's going into a significant fight without an angle, because he's not the bigger man against Boots like he was against Vasyl Lomachenko.
He's not bigger than Boots, he's smaller.
He's not facing an inactive fighter like he faced in Tosh Jailer because there's a year. There's a year in between the Jack Catterall fight and what became the Teofimo Lopez fight. A year and a case of plantar fasciitis. So he's not facing a guy who's smaller than he is, and he's not facing an inactive fighter. If there's any angle here to Team Lopez, it's that Boots didn't look good in his last fight with Karen Chukadzian.
Can he win?
Not unless he's Karen Chukadzian, and he didn't win. See, if you're looking at that Karen fight and telling yourself, well, Boots look bad, you're ignoring why.
If that's all you see.
That he looked bad. But why did he look bad? Because Karen Chukadzian's got a hop. He's got a pendulum step. He fights on his toes. In and out, putting punches together. Flustering Jaron Ennis. Unless Teofimo Lopez can not only duplicate that, but add to it.
He's got Eddie Reynoso now.
But he hasn't been with him that long. He hasn't actually fought with Eddie Reynoso in his corner yet, so I'm not expecting dramatic changes to him in his very next fight.
I don't even know that I should trust this will happen. I feel like Eddie Hearn and Jaron Ennis would be receptive to this fight. To them, it's a winnable fight against a familiar face. You can bill it as a pay-per-view.
You can do it in the big room at MSG. The Philly fans will make the drive down to support Jaron Ennis, and a couple of New Yorkers will show up to support Teofimo.
I think they'll be receptive to the fight, even though it's not a unification match.
Is this recompense for not moving up and not fighting Virgil Ortiz? No, not really. Not to me.
That fight was more dangerous than this one. Yeah, Boots looked bang average in his last fight, but in case you haven't noticed, so is Teofimo.
He didn't look good with Jermaine Ortiz or Steve Claggett.
Claggett.
Yeah, Boots looked average in his last fight, but Teofimo has looked bang average in 4 out of his last 5 fights.
It's almost like fulfillment of a prophecy. I never trusted that he would be able to stay in character once he moved up in weight. That little by little, the advantages that he had at 135 would be stripped away from him. At 147,
He hasn't proven to be as hard a puncher at 140 as he used to be at 135. The power's not the same. He couldn't knock out a Sandor Martin, couldn't knock out a Jermaine Ortiz, couldn't knock out a Steve Claggett. So what are you going to do at 147 with a bigger guy than them?
I think that's a legitimate question.
Not against the fight. If Teofimo is serious and he really wants to do this, I would relish the opportunity to see him get put in the hospital.
Finish him.
There is a part of me, though, that's curbing my enthusiasm. Can I really trust this, and do I really trust him? Are they serious, or is this something else? Elsewhere in the welterweight division, according to Conor Benn, 2 offers have been made to Mario Barrios for a fight. Conor Benn plans for his next fight. We're looking at Barrios in the first quarter of the year. I'm here at the WBC convention to really make that fight happen. I believe 2 offers have been put into Barrios. It's an O2 Arena fight, God willing. I'm hearing February 15th. Time is limited.
To get the deal done.
It may seem to you like we're always taking shots at Mario Barrios on this channel, that we are always undermining his ability to box, but there's just no nice way for me to say that he's the weakest link at 147, that I would pick every other belt holder at the weight to beat him. And on that premise, he has to
Be smart.
maximize his earnings.
Because a loss is right around the corner. It's only a matter of time.
If you decide to stay on your own side of the street, unify with Amon Stanionis, that's not going to pay you anything. That's not a big fight, and it will likely end up buried on an undercard. It won't be a main event like a Conor Benn fight.
No, Brian Norman fight theoretically could be a main event fight. It could be, but have they actually offered you anything?
I don't think so. I don't think Top Rank has made a play to bring Mario Barrios over to their side of things because to Top Rank, likely, it's more trouble than it's worth. Just to get Brian Norman a unification match?
He'd beat Mario Barrios.
Boots would too. Now, Boots and Matchroom already have made a play for a Mario Barrios fight, but maybe the money's not quite what they want it to be for such a dangerous fight. It would be a main event, and it would pay well, but you're gonna lose. You know you're gonna lose. Whereas with young Conroy, you might like your chances a little better. Even if it requires you to travel, remember, technically Conor never entered contender status at 147. Who's the best guy that he beat?
And he's been out for a bit. Hasn't been looking spectacular. You might stand a better chance of beating Conor in the UK for the same money that Boots pays in the US. Hell, it might be for more money.
2 years have passed since that anti-doping fiasco, and it really hasn't hurt Conor's profile. He's still in the media. He's still talked about, for better or worse. His ring return is gonna draw a crowd. It's worth some money.
Your only leverage towards getting a big payday is that you've got a belt, and you stand a relatively better chance of keeping it against Conor than the other champions at this weight. You fight any one of them, they'll beat you, and it might be for less money than Conor's paying out, so you have to be smart.
It's a small window of opportunity there because we're almost all the way through December. What Conor's talking about is a February fight date in the middle of February. That would leave Mario, if they strike a deal soon, with all of January and some of February to prepare. Strike while the iron is hot. And don't be indecisive, because for one as limited as Mario Barrios, the welterweight division, even though it's not everything it used to be, it's still a minefield. It's only a matter of time before some mandatory comes knocking on your door looking for a shot.
He lucked out, landing a spot on the undercard of Jake Paul versus Mike Tyson. He got to make some money.
You saw how he looked with the likes of Abel Ramos, and before that, you saw how he looked with Fabian Maidana. If these are the kind of guys that are giving you problems, you've got to be realistic. You've got to be honest with yourself.
Omira's got a big ass, and she can love you while you're still bringing in the money.
So win or lose, you've got to make sure you're bringing it in.
It's not a hard decision to make. It shouldn't be.
The Conor Benn fight is comparatively more winnable than some other fights in the welterweight division, and it certainly pays better. It's a main event, and while it might require you to travel,
There's no such thing as a free lunch.
come on. Scared money don't make money. Let's do this.
Let's go, Mario!